Good evening. It is so great to have all of you here. I'm Barbara Snyder, president of Case Western Reserve, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural event of the new Town Hall of Cleveland at Case Western Reserve University. And what a beginning it is. Before we begin the program, I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors listed in the program, particularly our media partner, IdeaStream. I also want to say a special welcome to all the local students who have joined us for tonight's event. You are going to have an unforgettable evening. Today's forum is the result of a partnership between the Town Hall Speaker Series and the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women, now celebrating its 10th anniversary. Your program includes more detail about the organization, including its founding and recent activities. I know that its leaders and supporters are so proud to have Gloria Steinem here as part of their efforts to mark this historic occasion. Many of them are here with us. Thank you all for your support of the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women. Now, I am especially delighted that Beth Ambresia is here today to tell us more. Beth is the past president of the Community Advisory Board of the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women. Please welcome her to the stage.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women and its Community Advisory Board, welcome. I am thrilled to see you all gathered here for this tremendous occasion. There are many people responsible for getting us here today, and they are listed in your program. I'd like to share a few words of gratitude, however. First, thank you to our sponsors for your generous support: Glen Mead, Laurel School, Brand Muscle, and Charter One. We are appreciative of the opportunity to partner with Town Hall of Cleveland at Case Western Reserve University. I can't be more grateful for the support of Lara Kalafatis, Cindy Barker, and Eric Dickin, without whose help we would not have pulled off this event. Mountains of thanks go to Hillary Guerin, our 10th anniversary chair. She is tireless. Thank you, Susan Troya, for your unending and generous wisdom, dedication, and enthusiasm for the center. It never fades. Thank you to our host committee. You launched yourselves into the community to rally excitement and attendance with great success. To the many women of the center's Community Advisory Board, your validation of the center's work and ambassadorship has been invaluable over the last decade. Thank you. Special thanks goes to all women of the Flora Stone Mather Alumni Association. They never wearied of their vision. Thank you, Pat Kilpatrick, a stalwart champion of women then and now. Thank you, Kathy Karapides, for being a strong and vibrant ribbon that ties past, present, and future together. Thank you, Lynn Singer. The light you shine upon the center never fades. A great thanks goes to President Barbara Snyder, who from the time she set foot on this campus 7 years ago, changed campus culture for the better in many, many ways. She has stood up for the center and recognized that change was needed and that it was possible. I want to recognize all of you, the many generations of women and the men who have chosen to gather today. Your collective presence speaks volumes. I'd like to give a shout out to the many Case Western Reserve University students and high school students here, including students from St. Martin de Porres, John Hay School of Science and Medicine, Cleveland School of the Arts, Shaker Heights High School, Laurel School, the Warner Girls Leadership Academy of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and Hathaway Brown. You are the future. Your momentum will move us forward. For more than 4 decades, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community women gathered with the intention of changing the world they experienced by advocating for a campus center for women, a place where women would be heard, understood, supported, and encouraged, a place where they would find community, connection, equality. In 2003, the dream was realized under the leadership of its inaugural director, Dr. Dorothy Miller, and later with a dedicated staff. The center sprung from seeds of hope, change, and discovery. In 10 years, we've seen the fruitful results of the center's work. In its next decade, and led by Director Dr. Shannon Lundeen, the center will continue to be a catalyst for change on campus and in women's lives. Thank you both. The work of empowering women and forging social change is not only the work of a university center or of women alone. It is work for all of us. While some conditions have improved for women, there are still mountains to climb. The momentum must continue. The revolution must progress. Join me in working for a day when women can live freely without fear of violence, when a woman will not earn less money for her work because of her gender or the color of her skin, and when a woman's value is not determined by anything but her strengths, contributions, and intellect. I look forward to us working together and when that day comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Beth, before you go, I just want to say, while Beth's still up here, Beth's work on behalf of the Community Advisory Board has been truly outstanding. She has led it for the last several years, and Beth, I am so grateful for your leadership over this last several year period. It has really made a difference for the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women and for Case Western Reserve University and women and men all over our campus. I also want to say a warm welcome to the incoming chair of the Flora Stone Mather Community Advisory Board, Hillary Guerin. I look forward to working with you and continuing our momentum to make our campus the kind of community that we all want to have. Your engagement and your support as the Community Advisory Board are invaluable. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, Hillary. And thank you, all the members of the Community Advisory Board. Now we are almost to the moment for which you have all been waiting. I'm going to introduce our speaker in just a minute, but I need to tell you about another very special woman who is the moderator of the question and answer session that is a part of Town Hall's tradition and will follow today's talk. Karen Beckwith is the university's Flora Stone Mather professor in our Department of Political Science. She joined Case Western Reserve in 2006 after more than 2 decades as a faculty member at other institutions, most recently at the College of Worcester. Her work focuses largely on women, gender, and politics, specifically in the United States and Europe. In one of her most prescient scholarly efforts, she and 2 co-editors published the book Political Women and American Democracy in the spring of 2008. At that very moment, then Senator Barack Obama and Senator Hillary Clinton were within 3 percentage points of one another at the polls, and each candidate was making an historic run for the White House. Talk about timing. Professor Beckwith's depth of expertise and understanding of this subject makes her the ideal moderator for our event today, and we are grateful that she is assisting us this evening. I know you will enjoy hearing from her after you hear from our speaker. Now, of course, it's time for me to get off the stage so you can hear from the extraordinary woman you have all come here to see. In many ways, Gloria Steinem needs no introduction. She truly embodies and exemplifies an entire era in our nation's history, and she continues to press for equal rights to this very day. Perhaps best known as the founder of Ms. Magazine in 1972, she continues to serve as its consulting editor. Her books include Revolution from Within, a book of self-esteem, outrageous acts, and everyday rebellions, and Moving Beyond Words. She also served as an editor of Houghton Mifflin's Reader's Companion to U.S. Women's History. Her talk today is entitled The Longest Revolution. Please join me in welcoming the inaugural speaker for this year's Town Hall Series, Ms. Gloria Steinem.
Well, are we going to have a good time tonight or what? You know, it is so clear to me that I am an excuse for you to come together and discover you don't need an outside organizer, agitator, troublemaker in the first place. You have all that you need right here, right? But I must say, I'm glad to be in Ohio, my home state, where nobody tells me I talk funny. I have to say Toledo is not exactly Paris, though. I am delighted to be on a campus where the first woman president, the great President Snyder you just saw, has increased the number of students, the degree of diversity, and the money. The billion-dollar campaign, fantastic. And I spent the afternoon at the Flora Stone Mather Women's Center talking to people. I love the idea that it started in the Spartan room, in this tiny little room, and now it's a whole new building together with the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Center. I mean, is this great or what? And I also want to thank you for welcoming and awarding on October 1st my friend and my hero, Dr. Dennis Mukwege, who is to violence against all females what Nelson Mandela was to apartheid violence against black women and men. Do come to see him. He is an extraordinary, brave, compassionate leader in this world. And you know, I feel I'm in a great place for another reason, which I promise to explain later on, which is that Ohio was part of the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. So I feel, in a way, that we have a vertical history, you know, that on this land once were cultures that were egalitarian, as we would now call them, that didn't even have he and she in their languages, for the most part, whose founding paradigm was the circle, not the pyramid, and who deeply understood and ruled in a way that said, we, as human beings, are linked, not ranked. And I think that is what we are striving for again, and somehow it gives me faith that if it happened for 95% of human history, as far as we know, the last 5,000 years, well, 500 on this continent, but maybe we just should declare patriarchy, racism, monotheism, nationalism, an experiment that failed, you know? And it's over now. So I'm glad for all those reasons, but I have to say the reason I'm most glad is looking at you. I mean, we are together in this room in a combination of people that could never have happened before and will never happen again. And each one of us is a unique combination of millennia upon millennia of heredity and environment coming together in a particular way in each of us. I never understood the nature versus nurture argument. Did you? It's obviously both. I mean, there's a person in every baby. Anybody who's ever met a baby knows that there's a person in the baby. And then, of course, we are more subject than any other animal because of our long infancy to our surroundings. So each of us is a unique miracle. And this isn't going to happen again, so here's my plan. In the same way, it's going to happen in wonderful ways, but not in this way. So my hope and dream is that each one of us, me included, leaves here with some new feeling of possibilities, of support, of understanding, of outrageous acts that we can do to create a better world. You have to promise me that before you leave, you will look around and meet at least 4 other people you don't already know. I mean, if you came here, it's because we share values and hopes. And you can meet all kinds of new revolutionary colleagues because of this evening. I mean, new jobs maybe will result, new love affairs might result. I mean, who knows what? But I hope, even though we are in an old-fashioned kind of setting, because we have to be with you looking at each other's backs and me looking at you. This is a hierarchical setting. Hierarchy is based on patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't work anymore, as we know. So, so at least we can pretend that we are sitting in a circle. And I would like to offer you the advantage of age, which is mainly knowing it was worse. Now, I know that this should be no limit on our ambitions, but I do think we need to know the trend line is up. Because when we first started, the major response was ridicule. As most things that are especially female are, perhaps because we're associated with children, we're not taken seriously, or perhaps because we can control having children, we're taken too seriously. But in any case, by the time we got to serious opposition, we just felt we'd accomplished so much. We had at least surpassed ridicule. But if we think about the last great movement to achieve for a large number of people a legal identity as human beings, the abolitionist and the suffragist movement, that took 100 years. That achieved a legal identity as other than possessions for all women and for men of color. And if that took 100 years, to achieve legal equality for all of us is likely to take 100 years too. And by most counts, we're only about 40 years into it. So what are we confronted with? We're confronted with the opposition of folks who want to take away the most fundamental right to reproductive freedom. We're confronted with hostility, and we are also confronted with the most sophisticated version of opposition, which is, well, the movement is over. You've succeeded. You don't need it anymore. You're living in a post-feminist, post-racist age. Excuse me? But that is, as we all know, what we're confronting. But it did take a century and to get a legal identity. And now we need legal and social equality with no power that is solely based on race or sex or ethnicity or class or sexuality. It takes time. I would like to say that to you from the bottom of my heart, because in the kind of electronic culture we are in now, it's not always so easy to remember. As the Cherokee culture says, it takes 4 generations to heal one act of violence. So I just want to contribute a few examples of reminders of what we are after. We need to always remember that women's issues aren't separate from economic issues, or vice versa. The women's movement is still treated as a compartmentalized, separate thing. In fact, no major issue on earth can be solved without women per se and the talents of women, but also without looking at the gender roles that divide us and that provide the model for every other kind of role that is passive and dominant. And even if you take the simplest thing is equal pay, right? I mean, actually, it wasn't simple in the beginning. People didn't even agree with that. But by now, it's known as the part I agree with. Right? But the Institute for Women's Policy Research tells us that paying women of all races equally to white men, because there are racial differences among women, as you well understand, and paying all women equally to white men for comparable jobs would put $200 billion more in the economy every year, $200 billion, and would have been much more effective than propping up banks on Wall Street as as a stimulus. It is the greatest possible stimulus this country could have. The money would get spent. It would not get put into Swiss bank accounts. It would create jobs and help the poorest kids, who are those who are dependent on a mother's income. But do we hear the words economic stimulus and equal pay together? No. I have never yet heard them in the same sentence. No matter where you look, including in medical practice, as on this campus, even a woman doctor makes about $50,000 less a year than a male doctor. A woman's ability to decide whether and when to have a child is not a social issue. It is not a single issue, though I think in political life a single issue is any issue not one's own. But it is a basic human right because it affects everything. It's the biggest indicator of whether a woman is educated or not, whether she can work outside the home or not, whether she is healthy or not, and also how long she lives. This country, I don't have to tell you, I think, has the highest rate of unplanned pregnancies, teenage pregnancies, and medically complicated births in the entire developed world. It also has the least sex education. Sex education has been suppressed in this country to an alarming degree, which allows pornography on the web to pretend to be sex education. And in fact, this is very dangerous, and the truth of the danger is present in the word itself, because porne means female slavery, and erotica means eros, love, mutual pleasure, free choice. They are two very, very different things. Just as rape is not sex, it's violence, pornography is not erotica. And we must say that over and over again so that those who purvey pornography don't take possession of sex and say we are somehow anti-sex because we are against the violence, the humiliation, and the danger of pornography. It is a distinction yet to be made. I think, yes, we know that rape is violence, not sex. We've managed to get that across, but not that pornography is not erotica. I think it's probably also clear to us, but maybe we should say it again, that women with children are less likely to get hired or paid well because they have children, while men with children are more likely to get hired and paid well because they have children. And you know, we understand, I think, the desirability of equal parenthood from the point of view of the child, so the children know that men are as loving and nurturing as women are. It's a libel on men to say that that is not true. And if we grow up thinking it is not true, then we replicate it. We think somehow that it's not possible. But I think in a very deep sense, nothing much is going to get solved, really solved, until men are raising children as much as women are. And the fact that that's not true is a penalty to men who don't get to feel, given the work patterns and the expectations of life, close to their children, loving to their children. You know, just in the same way that women become, many women become whole people by being in the world outside the house and developing the rest of our human qualities, men become whole people by raising children or being raised to raise children. All those qualities that are wrongly called feminine are only qualities necessary to raise a child. Patience, attention to detail, empathy, flexibility, all of those things are human qualities that every man possesses just as much as every woman. And of course, in addition, for the concern of all parents and everyone who loves children, the United States is the only modern democracy without some national system of child care, the only one. Actually, we once passed a national child care bill and Nixon vetoed it because it was supposed to be communist in those days. I remember being in a hall like this with my lecture partner of Dorothy Pittman Hughes, an African-American woman, and somebody got up in the back and shouted, "Why don't you go home to Russia where you belong?" And people just cracked up, you know. But that was the era, and of course we use whatever is bad of the era to condemn whatever we don't want to happen. But this is especially crucial right now, because the average cost of childcare in this country has surpassed the average cost of a college education. And, you know, what sort of penalty is that? And then, of course, we can continue thinking about the economically crazy structure we have, since the debt in which college students now graduate is bigger than the national credit card debt. So at the exact moment that kids or older people, whoever it is who's leaving education, should be able to explore and experiment in how to use their talents, they are saddled with debt that is also the only debt that can't be bankrupted. It can follow you to the grave. I mean, we're all trying to work on legislation to fix this, but at the moment, this is the problem. And meanwhile, state legislatures, instead of funding state universities, are funding building prisons, an endeavor which has gone up enormously in the prison industrial state, and making sure that they are run by the people who elected them, Wackenhut and others, who run prisons for profit. All right. So this is not true in every state, but it is true in most states. And it is a blessing on this campus that 75% of the undergraduates here have some form of financial aid. I'm thankful for that, and I say thank you to all of you who made it possible. The digital divide is also a newer development. And actually, it's a pretty good proxy for power, the digital divide. Because, for instance, more than 80% of the internet users are in industrialized countries. The fewest are in Africa. And if you look at the maps that show you instantaneously digital searches going up with little threads of bright colors, you can see the areas in this country that are poorer, and you can see the areas in the world that are poorer or less literate. So as we celebrate, and we celebrate the internet and all that it means to us in our ability to reach out, to find people, to organize, to find information, everything that it means to us, we must understand that it is also divisive. And if the internet companies, I think, had futures in mind, they would be subsidizing the education of every child in Africa. Paying the school fees, it's not that much, of every child in Africa, because they are the future of their industry as well. I think we are celebrating marriage equality as a great victory, but it's still true that if you look at public opinion polls, you see that in this country, 51% of Americans say, quote, homosexuality should not be accepted by society, unquote. And this is quite different, say, from Canada or Germany or other comparable democracies. So I think we have a lot of attitudinal change still to make. And I think also we need to understand the connections between and among all the movements in a way we don't. Every once in a while when I'm on a campus, someone will say to me, why are the same groups against birth control and lesbians? But when you stop to think about it, it makes sense, because they are against any forms of sexual expression that cannot end in conception. So they are against birth control and even sex education, and also against expressions of love and sexuality between two people of the same sex. This is such a false definition of human sexuality, and we have been given it for so long that its purpose was only procreation. I think that we are, although at this point I always worry about whether I'm maligning other animals, but I think that we are the only animals who experience the same sex drive when we can procreate and when we can't. That for us uniquely, it's a mark of our humanity, like our cerebral cortex and our ability to reason and remember, not just to think, but to think about thinking, that human sexuality is not only a way we procreate when we choose, but also a way we communicate and bond and express love and caring and mutual pleasure. And we have been lied to about this for a very long time. And we can see now in the coalition that opposes us and the issues that they oppose, that the idea that human sexuality is only for procreation is still out there and something we have to deal with. I also am not sure that enough of us understand that racism and sexism are intertwined and can only be uprooted together. There is no other way that it can be. That it can be successful, and not just because it's right, of course, because it's right, and because most of the women in the world are women of color, of course, that's true. And it is also true that wherever there is racism, females are more restricted. The only way you can maintain racism in the long run is to maintain the racial purity of women who belong to the more powerful group, and to exploit the bodies for cheap labor of those women who belong to the less powerful group. So wherever on earth there is a strong racist system, it's bad for women, very bad for women. It affects women differently. Some are imprisoned on a pedestal, as one abolitionist black woman said to her white abolitionist sisters, a pedestal is as much a prison as any other small space. And it exploits, it restricts one group and exploits women of color. And the truth is, it is bad universally for women. So we must understand that, and we must always be unified in our efforts against sex and race. And this is also true around the world. There's a man named Ambedkar who has written brilliantly in the past about this in the caste system in India, that the arrival of the caste system was what subordinated women, because women had to be subordinated in order to continue the caste system. That there were societies in southern India, especially, and in the Himalayas, that were, like our Native American societies, egalitarian, matrilineal, without gender prisons, until the caste system came along and began to change all that. So if there is nothing else, I think, that we can pledge to do tonight, it's to always, always see those two systems as intertwined and to be against them both. Whether we are white and male or female and people of color or whoever we are, if we want those systems to go, we have to understand they must be uprooted together. Now, here's something I must tell you, and I'm sorry to tell you because it's part of the backlash against women's movements everywhere. As you know, there is, as you can see, there is a gigantic women's movement in every country. And because of the violence against women that has always been present in order to turn women into a means of reproduction, whether it was child marriage or female genital mutilation, or whatever form it took in a culture, or female infanticide because sons were more valuable. I mean, all forms of it have now resulted, combined with sex trafficking, which is bigger than ever now. It's I think surpassed drugs and is almost as big as arms in its profitability. Because, for instance, child marriage and pregnancy is the biggest cause of teenage deaths around the world. Because in this country, if you count up all the women who have been murdered by their husbands and boyfriends since 9/11, and then you count up all the Americans killed in 9/11 and in both wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan, more women have been murdered by their husbands and boyfriends than Americans have been killed in all of those struggles. So we are not immune from what I'm about to say, right? Even though our gender balance is still not showing this. But the truth is that on this fragile spaceship Earth, there are now fewer women than men. And that is a first, as far as I know. There are now 101.3 men per 100 women. And this, capitalism would tell you that scarcity increases your value. No. It increases the stealing of women, kidnapping, China stealing women from North Korea, from northern India, stealing brides from southern. I mean, it is definitely not something that increases value. And you can see it also in what the supremacist, male-dominant terrorist groups do. For instance, in Nigeria, where they kidnapped a large number of young girls, as you know, and there was and is a big Save Our Daughters campaign. They more rationally could have kidnapped famous people, important people they could have got great ransom for. No, they kidnapped the one thing they need, which is wombs. In Santa Barbara, where the man murdered a large number of students, he did so actually saying it's because women control reproduction. You know, this is wrong. They are striving to control reproduction. So from Nigeria to Santa Barbara, we are being taught a deeply political lesson we have to understand as political. But I also want to tell you good news, which is that these connections are beginning to be made, to truly, deeply be made. For instance, I commend to you a landmark book called Sex and World Peace by Valerie Hudson and several other scholars, in which they have taken 100 modern countries and shown that the single biggest indicator of whether a country will have violence in its streets, inside itself, or whether a country will be willing to use military violence against another country is not poverty or access to natural resources or religion or even degree of democracy. It's violence against females. Because it is that, not because life is any more important than male life, but because that's what we see first. In an effort to control reproduction, to keep women as the biggest cheap labor force in the world, whatever the reason is, it's what we see first, often in our own families, and it normalizes the whole idea that it's right to have a dominant and a passive person, a subject and an object, that violence is a normal part of life, that you can't get rid of it, that it is ingrained. I mean, we're never going to have nonviolent countries until we have nonviolent families. We're never going to have democracy outside the home until we have democracy inside the home. We start where we live. So this is the good and the bad news, right? This is where we are, and this is what we are going to change. But I just want to say a couple of things at the end here in terms of guidelines. How do we know we're doing the right thing? We don't. And do not worry about what you should do. Do whatever you can. The idea that the decisions of what we should do are made up here is part of the problem. Do whatever we can. We have vote power. We have dollar power. We have body power. We have community power. We all have those powers, and many of us have much more. Do whatever we can. And I think the two great rules in my life anyway, of knowing that I'm maybe sort of on the right track, are one is their laughter. You know, laughter turns out to be the only truly free emotion. You can compel fear, obviously. You can also compel love, because if people are isolated and dependent in order to survive, they come to believe they're in love or in need of their captors. But you can't compel laughter. It happens when two things come together and suddenly make a third. It happens when you learn something. It's pure pleasure. It's like an orgasm of the mind. It's like an aha. You just learned something. Einstein, who could not possibly have said everything he's supposed to have said, but anyway, that he had to be very careful when he was shaving, because if he thought of something new, he laughed and he cut himself. So if we are sort of more or less on the right track for our internal selves and the external world, and using our uniqueness, as each of us is unique, probably there is laughter. And if you are part of a religion or a social group or something that doesn't let you laugh, leave. It is not the right place to be. And finally, in the spirit of this great university and all the educational tradition here, I just want to say that my last guideline for myself is, in terms of learning, is if I have more power than the people I'm talking to, I need to learn to listen. If I have less power, I need to learn to talk. If we each do that, whatever position we are in, and whatever disparate positions we may be in different parts of our lives, if we balance learning and talking, then we have already created our own democracy, set our spirit free, and we are able, finally, to hear each other, to listen to each other, and to speak our true stories. Thank you. I am hoping, anyway, that some of you sent cards up here with organizing announcements of upcoming troublemaking meetings that you think So this is a two-way street, right? It's not, right.
Let me start with a question from myself. What's the most significant positive change that you've seen, witnessed, celebrated in your lifetime thus far?
Just a little thing like that.
Yeah, just, and only one.
Well, what I started to think when you said that is the greatest thing is we know we're not crazy. You know? Because in a way, that's the most immobilizing and painful punishment, when you think that the system out there in which you are neither equal nor measuring up or the right group or whatever it is correct, and you are incorrect. And I think that's the role of movements, to allow us to come together and talk to each other and support each other, so we can combat the hierarchical system that may be making us feel crazy.
All right. Well, I have several questions, and some are my own and some are others, and there may be other questions coming up. There's been a lot to celebrate and a lot of achievements. There's a lot still to be done. So let me ask, what's the likelihood of an Equal Rights Amendment in the U.S. Constitution?
You know, the Equal Rights Amendment is coming back, as you may have noticed. There are more people working on it now. And I think the question is, in what form does, I mean, there are different tactical considerations, which you know, was it 3 states or is it over again? I won't go into that, but I think, first of all, the terrible things that were supposed to come from the Equal Rights Amendment have already happened, right? Same-sex marriage, women in combat. We were always in combat in the street anyway. I never understood why that was. They just didn't want us to learn how to use guns, I think. I think that was the whole. But, you know, so many of those things have gone away. And there is a new book coming out by Jessica Neuwirth about exactly why we need the Equal Rights Amendment, because I think we need to know exactly what it would change. But I think one of the basics is that we have lost some decisions because, as in the Walmart discrimination suit, the biggest case of sex discrimination ever, and we lost it because we couldn't prove state of mind. It's very hard to prove state of mind, but the Equal Rights Amendment would make it discriminatory effect, not intent. So that alone, would make it worth it. And personally, I mean, this hasn't come together. There's not an organization to do this yet, but I think I think it should be both sex and race this time, the Equal Rights Amendment. And I think we could do that.
Great. I have a question that begins from my hero organizer, Gloria. Mine too. How can advocates championing different causes for social justice work together, share their parallel struggles, and frame their needs and align their work for broader and deeper impact?
You're saying, how can we do that?
Yes.
Right. Well, I think that organizing is organizing, so we kind of learn from each other anyway. We learn, first it's consciousness, first you have to say what the problem is, and people who experience it, need to speak out. And you need to listen to them, because the people who experience the problem know much more about it than the experts. And then, if once you've passed the consciousness stage, then you begin to reach the coalition stage. And I think we learn from each other the organizing process. And also, I think we know but don't enunciate enough the connections, as I was saying, between sex and race and class, between sexuality-based discrimination and I think we sort of understand. So I would say we need to follow the organic connections. And usually we're the most powerful where we are working on what we know the best, or what we personally have experienced. And we can support our friends over there who are working against fracking, for instance. And of course, there is a connection between, the same cultures that withdrew a sense of godliness from women withdrew a sense of godliness from the environment in order to make it okay to conquer women and the environment. There's a guy named Henry Breasted, who was a wonderful Egyptologist in the 1800s, who said, monotheism is but imperialism in religion. Because it was about the gradual withdrawal of any sense of the sacred from women and the environment.
This is the 20th anniversary of the passage of the Violence Against Women Act, which has been renewed and extended with some success recently. How effective do you think the act has been? What does that say in terms of violence against women internationally? Can we take some hope from this? Do you see more things that need to be done?
All of the above. Yeah, no, the Violence Against Women Act is VAWA, as we call it. It's very, very, very important. When I was growing up in Toledo, women who got beaten up on Saturday night were routine in my neighborhood. And it only became serious if it was lethal, or so, but it was either routine, or it was his fault, or he was drunk, or it didn't matter. And it was also the single crime in which the job of the police was to get the victim and the criminal back together. That's what they thought was success, all right? So we've come a long way from that, and a long way from the early days when we were just spiriting women from violent homes away across state lines and into people's houses. At least now we have shelters, and we understand the process better. We understand the Stockholm syndrome. You might say, how difficult it is to get the adversary out of your mind, especially, and if it is for political prisoners, imagine for someone with whom you have children. I mean, so I think we understand it better, and there are also programs that help men understand it, that help men understand that they are perpetuating supremacy crimes, because they have been taught they should be in control and so on. So, and it is, as I was saying, it is our biggest part of the global situation in which now there are fewer females than males on Earth.
Continuing for just a moment to think about public policy like the Violence Against Women Act, there's some public policy that we don't have in the United States. So every country in the world has paid maternity leave, except 4 countries. Those countries are Botswana, Papua New Guinea, Lesotho, and the United States. Why doesn't the United States have paid maternity leave? So those are the statistics for paid maternity leave. Why don't we have paid parental leave? And what would we need to do to get it?
Vote and again vote. and make clear that this is an issue on which your vote depends. I think the part of it is the leftover sort of philosophy of, everything is individualized. If you want to have children, that's your affair. That's nothing. But wait a minute, this is a socially useful act. The same people who are against paid maternity leave are also in a snit because the population is going down. So it's not rational, I think. It's about a lack of a sense of communal welfare. But we have to make it a priority in our voting and with our political leaders.
There's several questions here that I'm going to be shifting focus for at least a minute that ask a lot about young women and circumstances for young women. One person has asked, how do we motivate and educate women who do not know what they're missing? There is a whole generation of young women who have not had to take a friend to a back alley abortion or drink from a separate drinking fountain because of race. How do we motivate and educate, again, women who do not know what they're missing? That's the phrase in particular, which I found very interesting.
Well, I think we listen, because, they're having, okay, suppose they're a student on this campus. Nobody may be telling them that they are going to be paying back, or on some campus, I hope they're not in debt, but anyway, that they're going to be paying back the same student debt as the male student sitting next to them, but they're going to make between $1 million and $2 million less over their lifetime in order to do it. When people learn that, they get mad. Why is 1 in 5 women on campuses sexually assaulted on the average? And why is this the only form of assault that you don't have to report to the police? You can have a college procedure if you want, unlike in Canada, say, right? So, I don't, let's see. I don't think it's about making women grateful for the past. I think it's about making us, not making us, but giving us the information to understand we should be angry about the present. Right.
Continuing on the theme of the focus on the university, and after all, here we are, one questioner writes, what do you say to university and community college leaders who consider women's studies, African American studies, no longer relevant and hence are willing to cut these programs, not fortunately, in regard to women and gender studies here on campus.
I used to tell them they're not relevant, you know. Because, you know, women really, I mean, women's studies, African American studies, Native American, gay and lesbian, those are remedial studies. Hello? You know, that we're still learning more about Europe than about Africa, which happens to be bigger than Europe, North America, I mean, all these other continents combined. I mean, it's insane. It's, you know, it took me 20 years to get over my college education because because it was a brainwashing more than an education. I mean, there were wonderful people, but I was learning all about Aristotle, and nobody thought it strange that he was saying women have no souls and break a mirror if they look, you know, I mean.
So let me just interject for a small moment. We don't have an African American Studies program on this campus, and I would be really pleased if we had one. I think this is the first university at which I've taught that doesn't have one. We do have a wonderful Women and Gender Studies program, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And we do address those issues in that program. But it would be great to do a little more remedial education, particularly in regard to Cleveland and the state of Ohio.
That brings to mind something else, which is that the activist part of the movement, which came up before, I mean, there were women's studies, African Americans, right, was quite diverse. You know, I mean, the first analysis of social policy I ever heard was from the National Welfare Rights Organization, who were African American women by 80% or so. And they had done this feminist analysis of, and my speaking part, you know, it was quite diverse. And then, I mean, not diverse enough, nothing in this country is diverse enough, but very diverse, much more than any other movement. And then because the academic courses grew up separately, women's studies, African American studies, Latino stuff, and because there weren't enough women of color with tenure on campus to make sure they were part of everything, I think that academia is quite responsible for making us think it was a white middle class movement. And you know, that's a serious amount of damage there, you know, because if you have that image, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Although, if you let me give a little negative shout out to the mass media.
Yes.
I will say it's not all on the university. I'll defend my
no, it's true,
institution.
But I mean, just the codification of it, kind of, right.
I will also ask, because one of my students asked, when you talk about your college education, you were educated at a women's institution at Smith College. How did that, aside from go Smithies, but given that you had to get over that, what was distinctive about that? Is there anything that you can point to that you didn't have to get over, but that you carry with you?
Oh yeah, no, that it was a women's institution was the good part. You know, because, I mean, the courses were the bad part, but the women were the good part. And it wasn't their fault, you know, it was because they were trying to be Harvard for women or something, and so they had the same dumb courses that Harvard had. But, you know, I think that we were talking about that at the center this afternoon, and I think it is very important to maintain historically female colleges and historically black colleges, and so that people can have, who haven't had it in some other part of life, can have the experience of being central, you know, just to see what it feels like. And it's still a way disproportionate number of science, math, you know, sort of non-traditional women who go to women's colleges. So it's not right for everybody, but it was really right for me because I had gone to this huge high school in Toledo where the big thing was the football team. I mean, it was totally, that was it. this is my measure of it. You had to stop playing. There was only one rule in the whole school. You had to stop playing football when you were 22. So
There were 2 rules. I bet the other rule was you had to be a boy.
what?
I bet there were 2 rules to playing football in your high school.
Oh, yes. No, that's right. Absolutely true. Right, right. No, but it was understandable in a way because it was a very poor neighborhood. So boys in poor neighborhoods only see people who look like them, you know, playing sports. That's how. And girls in poor neighborhoods only see people who look like you in show business. So I thought I was going to dance my way out of Toledo, which was like completely unrealistic. Right.
I have a question here that asks, and there are many questions akin to this that ask about men and boys. And this question asks, if you had 10 minutes to address or influence adolescent males in the US today on how to build equality, justice, and compassion, what would you say to them?
Well, I think I would say first about them. You know, I mean, I think that we need to understand the way that race and gender and all this stuff imprisons all of us. So while I certainly want him to be kind and respectful in general, I think I would have a more reliable ally if I discovered that he really wanted to be an artist, but his dad didn't think this was, you know, going to make enough money, or was a boy thing to do, or you know, some way in which the gender was restricting him too. With older men, when I'm speaking with audiences of mostly men, what they want to talk about especially is how much they missed having nurturing fathers. And it's heartbreaking. And also, some also talk about what it was like to see their mothers being humiliated and beaten. You know what I mean? I have seen big professional football players with tears streaming down their cheeks about what it was like to see their mothers being beaten. And you know, I think the motivation has to come organically, so that not only are you doing it for someone else, but you're doing it for your own full humanity, and then you have a real ally. And it's really about empathy. Trying to say, okay, well, what would your life be like if you were the same person with the same humor and ambition and were born female? What would it be like? Right.
This is a question about how to do some of that oneself as a young person. So Olivia asks, she writes, Gloria, exclamation point. I'm starting an extracurricular club at my school called Women Empowerment, or WE, W-E. Do you have any suggestions for how to inspire young women today?
Well, you know, I think that inside every kid, male and female, and somehow this happens in other countries in the world too, I mean, it's amazing. There is a person who at some point in their young life said, it's not fair, you are not the boss of me. And that is the basis of every social justice movement. You know? If you can just hang on to that. The problem is that the gender roles come along at you know, 11, 12, 13 or whatever, and make you feel that unfairness is the way of life, you know. But it depends how old this child or young woman is. But I would say, just say, look for what's fair, look for what makes you able to be who you really are and you feel good about yourself. Keep people around you who make you feel smart, not dumb, because we're communal creatures, and so we need that kind of support. And I would say to the adults around her, listen to her. Listen to her.
Let me take us in, again, a slightly different direction. There are several questions in regard to this. Can you talk a little bit about social media and how it's affected the feminist movement in the United States and elsewhere, both for good and for ill?
Well, we were talking about that this afternoon. I mean, it's amazing to be able to find information, to find people who are working on this specific thing you are, to communicate across continents. All that is amazing, and all to the good. The amount of anti-female violence and harassment on the web is huge. I mean, a female name on the web is 100 times more likely to get threats of violence than a male name on the web. So we have to deal with that. And the other thing that I think we have to remember is that that empathy doesn't happen over a screen. So we can get information and we can find each other, but we won't know what we're feeling. The oxytocin, the tendon befriend, that allows us to empathize. Oxytocin allows us to empathize. It doesn't get produced from a screen. It only gets produced with all 5 senses. So we value it and use it, but we understand that you can't raise a baby on the internet. No, we have to balance it with all 5 senses, like we are in this room.
The first question involves sexual assaults on women, mentioning experience of being raped on a college campus, mentioning being, this is not the right language, inappropriately touched by man on campus. What do you advise in terms of thinking about how we need to think about casual sexual assault of women, of young women on campus in particular?
So this has to do with touching without permission, right? Okay. The whole thing of women's bodies belonging to ourselves is so important because it is rooted in taking over reproduction, that women's bodies are public property, and therefore it's okay to decide when and whether they have children, or to only value them if they have children, or to only value them when they're young because they might have to. All of everything that flows from the idea that women's bodies are not our own property is part of the problem, not the solution. And you have a right to say no. No one can touch you, male or female, without your permission. I wrote with a man named Michael Kimmel, whose work you might know as a very great ally who's writing about men and masculinity, and who's a wonderful authority in and of himself. Because there is a law in California about to be passed that instead of the old criteria of no means no, which made silence yes, requires an affirmative yes. And it's the first product of President Obama's conference about sexual assault on campus. And the way we started it, maybe some of you saw it, was in the New York Times last week. The way I wanted to start it to capture people's attention was to say, okay, suppose somebody arrives on your doorstep with a bag and invades your house and stays there and says, well, you didn't say no. Suppose you've had too much to drink and somebody comes in the house and robs you. Was your drinking an invitation to being robbed? No. The laws about women's bodies have been so much worse than the laws about private property. So much worse. So, I can't emphasize this enough because I think we don't have enough research, we don't have the right laws. We don't understand that trespassing is treated more seriously than body invasion. And we don't even have research, not that we need it, but anyway, to demonstrate how traumatic body invasion is. Our skin is our boundary. That's our sense of self. And it's what makes sexual assault of men, of women, of children, it makes it so traumatic. Because this is our sense of self. So, you have a right to say, my body is my own. You don't have a right to, and actually, I have to say, I think if we're not talked out of it by society, we have instincts for this. Don't you think so? I was sitting once in New York on a couch years ago with quite an okay man, not a bad person at all. We're waiting for some boss to come in, I don't know. And I had my hands like this, and he put his hands around my wrists and tried to kiss me. And I was so instantly angry that I couldn't move my hands that I bit him on this. No, blood is running down. But I didn't think about it. I was like a cat, like an animal. We have this instinct, and that society pressures us out of it. I was just lucky that somehow I didn't get pressured out of that instinct. And I must say he was quite nice about it in later, but I used to say, look at this little scar.
He ever did that. Let's hope that's the last time he ever behaved like that.
I think he probably didn't think about it after that.
I think in that case, we'll let that be the last answer. Ms. Steinem, thank you so much. Thank you. Can I touch you? Oh! Ooh. Thank you. I touched you first.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lynn Singer, Deputy Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Case Western Reserve. Gloria Steinem, you are the resounding answer to the question, can one person really make a difference? Thank you. Thank you for honoring us with your presence today to celebrate a decade of growth of the Flora Stone Mather Center for Women. Thank you for the difference you have made in all our lives. Karen Beckwith, thank you for moderating today and posing the provocative questions we all wanted Ms. Steinem to answer. Gloria Steinem, you once said, a movement is only composed of people moving. To feel its warmth and motion around us is the end as well as the means. So most importantly, we thank our Community Advisory Board and all of you in our audience today. You who have moved to come together on this historic occasion to support the cause of equity for women. You have already made a difference. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.